Ladies and gents, welcome back to another Engineers podcast. Today we're joined by Andy Stewart, who's a staff engineer at Tide. Tide offer SMEs a single platform for anything business banking, and a really interesting topic that we're going to be talking about today is their one platform. And Andy's very kindly going to break this down for us and some of their engineering goals and why they actually do this. Andy, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Elliot. Glad to be here.
Good to
Yeah,
have you for sure.
where do you want to start then?
Let's start with you. Do you want to give us an intro into Andy the engineer? Then I think it'd be a really good idea for you to give us almost your elevator pitch on Tide, who the business are, and break that down for us.
Sure. So I've been a software developer or engineer kind of since university. Always interested in computers. Did a computer science degree at the University of Sheffield I graduated in 2000. So I've kind of been doing this a while. Um, I've worked for a mixture of companies. So started as a consultancy, so got really good experience for 3 years working across a number of sectors, sort of finance, uh, things like that. Worked for a product company doing accountancy, and then kind of went contracting. So got some good experience in sort of large message-based systems, so foreign exchange, healthcare, quite a lot of gambling. Um, then kind of had a go at running a consultancy with some mates. That was 3 years. That was quite hard work. Learned quite a lot of hard lessons, and then sort of the 5 years before Tide, running a small engineering team that did sort of sports betting, sort of like a hedge fund. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
That as an engineering team, we sort of built everything, ran everything, and then was looking for a new challenge last year, and then that's when I came across Tide. And Tide, our sort of mission is to save our members time and money. So we call our customers members. So we have a real member first approach to things. And like you say, we focus really on that small business segment. So it's geared up for people that are running a business, and we want to make it super easy for them. So that was a mission that really resonated with me, having been a contractor for sort of 7 years and running a small IT consultancy for 3 years. Kind of was aware of how cumbersome some of these banking products are. Some of the big banks, you've kind of got this very heavyweight software. Maybe you've got expensive fees, and then you also have to kind of bolt in extras like accountants and bookkeeping and things like that, and also kind of sending invoices. So that's what Tide like to are focusing on, and we don't really kind of call ourselves a bank, but a financial platform for our members. So we've got these connected products, so we can raise an invoice and then we can tell you when it's been paid, and and send reminders and things like that. So to really take the stress out of running the members' business, so they can focus on what they want to do and kind of serving their customers. So that's really our kind of elevator pitch, and why we think we're quite unique as a proposition. So I got the job at Tide as a senior staff engineer. I work in the SAPIs team, so that's the services and APIs. So we're a kind of API first company, so we want to expose our APIs to Tide's carved up into a number of domains. We call them sort of speedboats. So you'll have like the payments domain, business services, financial services, and so we're offering the APIs that we build not just to kind of members through the app, but also to other domains so that they can build interesting things on top of that. So I'm currently mainly working in sort of service foundations and payment with a heavy focus on payments. So if we offer the ability to initiate a payment through an API, then that will also be available to other teams. So billing can use that and things like that, or we can use it for rewards and things like that. So yeah, I'm spread over a number of teams, and kind of help run them and help shape the architecture and the direction of where we're going.
Let's kick on and talk a little bit about one platform. It's great to understand a little bit more about the history of Tide and what makes Tide where they are today. But one platform is pretty integral to the business. It's how you build everything or a lot of things inside the business. It'd be great to understand how one platform is actually leveraging and fueling some of your growth going forwards, because I know the plans are really ambitious.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Tide does have big ambitions. We're a scale up. We're growing in terms of the number of members we're attracting. We're growing the team. I think when I joined Tide, there was like 1,000 Tidians. That was back in May last year. We're now at 1,500. So we're always adding more engineering teams. We've just launched in India, or I say just launched, but it was actually kind of November, December last year. So when I joined, we were building towards that. Like a lot of small companies, we started with a monolith, and that served us pretty well. The team, it was a startup. The team were able to build and iterate really quickly, but as we grew, that became cumbersome and difficult to work with. So
Yeah.
the one platform initiative is that imperative of how we build, where we want to build something once and then we want to be able to reuse it. So we'd already made really good progress. We'd pulled out some of the things like IAM, the API gateway, how you log in, authenticate members, some of the onboarding journeys and things like that. And then also the thing about Tide is that we don't do the banking or the card processing ourselves. We work with partners to achieve that. So in the UK, we've got PPS, who are now EPS, they're doing the card issuing and processing, and we've got ClearBank, who are actually providing the bank accounts. And then we've got outsource arrangements with them. But then there'll be different partners in India, and then if we go into another jurisdiction, it'll be another partner. So kind of as with the monolith, a lot of those things were kind of quite tightly intertwined. So the business logic and the actual integrations were quite closely knitted together. And so what we wanted to do when launching in India is actually separate the business logic, have a foundational service that knows how payments are orchestrated, because that business logic is generally the same in different markets, and then isolate the integration with our partners in adapters. So a big focus on what we've done last year was defining APIs to these integrations, these adapters, and defining a common Tide language, if you like, because also Tide have our own internal language. So what we call like the current accounts that we provide our members, we call them BCAs, and that's kind of Tide terminology. So a
Yeah.
lot of the internal services that we build and that we provide to our teams, they'll use this Tide terminology and make it consistent and easy for teams to work with. And then the complexity about maybe a certain provider calls it something else, or when you're onboarding onto their system, they've got different entities. So I know one provider calls something an account, and it's not what you or I would think of as an account. So we stopped that kind of knowledge about the market specifics leaking into the rest of the system. So we're also, a lot of us, quite big fans of the Team Topologies book, which I assume maybe you've heard other engineers talking about. And one of the focuses when providing these foundational services is to reduce the cognitive load on other teams that are interacting with that. So we kind of achieve that in a few ways. One, we define the APIs on the adapter side. So if you are given the job to go away and integrate with a given provider, you know what kind of functionality we need at Tide to support the rest of our application. And you can kind of ignore all the other bits that that platform might provide, as long as you're providing that clean API. And then on the other side, we're all using a common Tide domain language, and it makes it easier for us because we're all just clearer about what those things are and what we're talking about. So that's kind of what the one platform imperative's about. And then that's how it should speed delivery, because when we've managed to launch in India and we've been very successful. And now what we want to do is kind of kill that legacy in the UK. So we're currently some of the teams we're going through a migration to bring that back. So that's quite a challenge because we've got 500,000 members in the UK, and we obviously, don't want to disrupt their payments. So we're doing it very carefully and doing the migration.
Yeah.
That will give a lot of benefit, just bringing that back to the UK, because that separation between like our card issuer and our banking provider will make things much clearer and more
Yeah.
supportable. And it also then, when we move to another market, we know what functionality we need from a partner, and it also makes that integration very
Yeah.
clear what we're doing.
We started off talking about a monolithic service, like most businesses start, and there's probably quite a lot of complexities in there that I can't grasp, but I've seen some pros there. Obviously, speed of delivery into a new market being India, and
Yeah.
hence why you're circling back to UK and readdressing that scenario. But why do you think the one platform was a really important introduction from an engineering and product perspective for Tide?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think one of the things that we were able to do, particularly in India, because we were launching a brand new product, so we didn't have to deliver everything that Tide is in the UK. Um, and what we were able to do was we were able to focus on core pieces of functionality in that payment space. So we looked at what we needed to do based on what the offering in India was going to be from day one. So what we wanted to do was open an e-money account that our members could fund and then spend on their card. And so we were able to focus on building out that specific piece of functionality, and that was defining the entire slice. So what the core business logic would look like, and then what APIs the integrating team would need to do. And then that was able to give real focus to those teams, and it was able to give them a much smaller problem to work within. So we were able to define those sort of core journeys, what those APIs look like, and then focus the teams on just that, and actually like really concentrate on getting that out in a quarter. And then we've been able to layer up. So as we introduce more functionality into India, we've been able to add more and more functionality to those core journeys. And then the final step is filling it out and addressing the gaps that we've got between the functionality in the UK and what target architecture was. Because I think if we tried to
Yeah.
tackle that in one go, it would have been too big and you'd have had this long running project that was seemingly making no progress. So it's actually been really beneficial to us to be able to do it in a new market, prove, because this sort of separation of the integrations and the business logic was kind of a new thing. So a lot of the other services like IAM and stuff like that are kind of reusable as they are and are mainly, they don't have kind of
Yeah.
supplier integrations. So it's really useful to prove this in India, prove it worked. And we've scaled very quickly in India. We've gone from nothing in kind of December to over 100,000 members. And that's gone very smoothly. And so we've been able to prove the one platform approach, and then having validated that, bring that back to the UK. And then that will give us a really solid platform for when we decide what the next market to launch is. We know what capabilities we need to support, and it should just be doing that integration.
Yeah. Okay. I think the reusability of infrastructure and services, has been a really big thing over the last number of years. We've had one or two businesses on the podcast, adopt the same approach. Amazon have done that, and obviously you're added to that list successfully, being able to pivot from the UK business into India. And obviously, we've spoken about some of the ambitious growth plans, no doubt, new markets to come. Aside from what we've just spoken about in regards to India and how fast you've actually been able to and understand the business logic, and that's solved a problem in itself, and you've been able to move quite quickly. What other challenges do you think a centralized platform can solve for a business or for your business?
Yeah, so we've got it's it's that kind of team topologies thing. So we've been able to focus the knowledge about certain things into certain teams, so we can have a team that understands what the generic business flows we want. And we've got things like app fraud legislation coming in next year, and so we want to kind of layer in more checks and balances and things like that, which are going to protect our members. And we were able to do that in a single team because that team owned that application code. And also the benefit to that is once that team have implemented that functionality, what we do is we build to the highest standard. So if there's a higher standard here on this area and there's a higher standard here on this area, then we build to that. So basically, once we've built in in one market, we can then bring it straight to another market. So that's one benefit. So we don't kind of have to redo that, and we're not playing catch up in like different markets. Another benefit is that we've then been able to isolate our integration. So, like with the monolith, you'd actually got, is it a problem with the third party? Is it a problem with the way we've integrated with the third party? Is it a problem with the business logic? Is it a problem with our database or whatever? Whereas these two things are now completely separate. So we can see, and we're very event driven architecture, very asynchronous. So a lot of the time, if we're passing a command from the payment service to the adapter that's actually going to maybe make the payment, we've got a much better idea of where it's gone wrong because we can see that the banking service has handed it over to the adapter, and we can see that maybe the adapter is struggling to contact the third party, or they've got a bad response. So it makes it much clearer and more supportable, and know who to go to when there are problems or
Yeah.
issues.
Okay. It is a smart approach, I think, as you actually, talk and break down some of the challenges that it solved. That centralized function, for a number of people and technology reasons, makes a lot of sense. I talk about a centralized platform quite confidently, but would you be able to break it down for us just in regards to the technologies actually used in building one platform so that we can understand it?
Yeah, so it's it's primarily I'm talking about it from the back end, but it's also quite applicable from the front end as well. So briefly to kind of go into the front end, we had a big migration last year where we had so we've got a web app which has got some of the functionality, and that's kind of in Angular, and then we did have native apps on Android and iOS, and then that you've got that kind of problem where you've got this race for, maybe you get a feature in iOS, or maybe you get, and then you've got a different team to build it in Android. So there was the same kind of problem there. So the one platform approach has been used on the front end as well. So there's a big project, we've migrated to Flutter. So there is one code base, and it gets built once, and then it'll get built for the the appropriate target device. So that's another area where now we just work with mobile engineers. We don't work with iOS engineers, and we don't work with Android engineers. We work with mobile engineers. We build the feature once, and then it's available on Android and iOS. So that's another benefit, and that's kind of an example of how the one platform approach really kind of runs through everything we do. Um, and then in terms of the back end, really what we're talking about is these services, and we use Java everywhere. I know in a microservice based organization, I guess you've got two choices. You can kind of say we're microservices and we will standardize on technology, and we'll kind of, we'll get a benefit because we'll be able to reuse libraries, we'll be able to move team members around, or we can inner source. So if there's a problem in a service, somebody could raise a PR and do that. Or you can go the other approach, and teams can kind of do whatever they like, and they can use like Rust and Go and all that kind of stuff. So we've sort of we've standardized, we've got a fairly standard modern Java stack, um, and so all the teams are writing in that, and yeah, and then we just kind of collaborate together, and the APIs are defined in code, so the other team that picks that up, they know what they have to implement, and they can just kind of crack on and get that done. And then we use things like Swagger or GitHub pages to show what the APIs look like, and that's how they kind of get
Right.
consumed.
I do want to talk about team structure in the next couple of moments, but it'd be good to understand that model between, you've either got a choice of a Java stack or Rust, Go stacks. I'm now getting to the assumption that teams are autonomous and they can make their own decisions on tech that they're using.
Well, like I say, we're kind of heavily geared up to, like, the teams use Java, and that's what our tooling is. So really, we kind of stick to that, and I think that does have the benefits of. So one of the things we're doing in foundations now is we're kind of trying to take ownership of libraries and things like that. So libraries around how we consume and produce messages. We use like message inbox and outbox patterns, and we don't want every single team who wants to use that pattern to have to re-implement the wheel. So no, we kind of really are primarily primarily set up as a Java shop, and that's really what we want is teams empowered to use the platform and build the business functionality and build what our members do, and be able to iterate fast. So I would say we're quite
Yeah.
strongly opinionated in the technologies that we use.
Yeah, good. I think that's important too. I definitely think that's important. Talk to us a little bit about the team structures then for one platform and how they've evolved over time.
Yeah, and I think they've evolved quite quickly actually. So I think when I started, there was a fairly clear split between, we had sort of sappy back end teams who would work as a kind of like autonomous unit, and then front end engineers were slightly separate to that. And one of the one platform team we first formed was more cross functional than that. So we pulled front end engineers in, um, and that started off as a single team. And also, the idea originally behind it was going to be a temporary team. We were going to write these foundational services and then hand them over to other teams. But then that kind of didn't work very well because you had this lack of clear ownership. So obviously, teams like to be empowered, like to be able to make their own decisions. And then what we found was there was quite a lot of to-ing and froing, because the team who was going to be handed over to would be involved in the PRs, and there was just kind of natural disagreement, which was quite hard to break, because you've got the tension of one team's writing it and another team's going to own it. So actually, we quickly realised that as a strategy wasn't going to work, and that
Yeah.
this team we this temporary team we'd formed actually became a permanent team, and the decision was taken that they would own those foundational services. And then what we found was they were able to go a lot faster, and then they would own the APIs, the adapters. So that was kind of one quick evolution. And then it also allowed us to kind of redefine the boundaries within like the payments domain, for example. So originally payments was kind of quite one big group, and it was quite hard to say who's responsible for what. So we kind of divided it into the foundations part, and then the market integrations and open banking and cards. And so we were able to kind of carve it up, and again kind of reduce the cognitive load and what people had to think about. So it's actually an example of how we've been able to use Conway's law, and actually kind of carving these things up like this has actually then made it easier to reshape our organization internally. um, and yeah, now we've got much more cross-functional teams as well. So we've got
Yeah.
more mobile engineers involved, and sort of able to build these complete slices. Another thing that we had success with was we found it was quicker to build on web as kind of like a demo, and then kind of fold. So actually, we changed to a build on web first, and then we were able to kind of then what we'd built, we would then build out on mobile. So that was actually quite a quick way of showing that what we built from a foundational perspective worked, and then actually kind of
Interesting.
evolved.
Interesting. Something that I pick up a couple of times now, cognitive loads come up
Yeah,
a few times. Is that something that the business recognized that was actually a hindrance for teams as you were growing at a phenomenal scale?
I think so. I think that's always a driver for organizations in having, these. I think a long time before I came on board with Tide, they'd gone through the exercise of looking at domain driven design, breaking it down
Yeah.
into domains. So whether it was a conscious thing about cognitive load or kind of one of the benefits of it, I think our leadership are very aware of cognitive load, and that we want teams focused on specific things, and not having them to worry about things. So yeah, and we look at
Yeah,
like
good.
yeah, the cloud platform as well. So teams don't have to worry about how they get their code deployed into production, because that's kind of taken care of by what the cloud team are doing, and the DevX team. So the teams can focus on delivering that value to our members.
Yeah, great. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about expanding into new markets, what's to come, anticipated challenges with maybe what you've learned about, deploying into India. It'd be great to understand, the next year or so for Tide.
Yeah, so a big part of it's kind of bringing what we've done back to the UK, and I think that's going to be one type of challenge with like as we've mentioned before, the migration of we've got 500,000 members. Like there's a tangled monolith. We've done a really good job of kind of killing a lot of it, and now we need to kind of strangle off the final pieces and get rid of that. So that's one challenge. I think one of the things that we're kind of aware is on the horizon, and I'm not sure what the answer to this is. We're now in a position where okay, we're in two markets, and the team there. I think there are high standards to writing a foundational service. You need to make sure it works well. We're writing payments. We need to make sure that we look after our members' money. If things go wrong, they need to go wrong in, I wouldn't say a predictable way, but also I would say a predictable way. Like we know where it's broken. We know how we can recover it. We know how we can fix it. Um, so that might be things like the asynchronous nature of the adapters. Kind of will, if a
Yeah.
provider's down, it'll try again and a bit later, and then try again and then try again before kind of giving up. Um, so it has gone very smoothly. But what happens when a team is running a service in two markets? So what happens if something goes wrong with a provider in one country and a provider in another country? And now we've got a team that actually they've got two incidents to handle at the same time. And then if you kind of go into a third or a fourth market, then what does it mean for a team to operate the service in four markets, and is that sustainable? So they're interesting questions, because also I think what we've learned with what I talked about in the sort of team evolution is that we know things work best when the teams own the services they write. So how do you
Yeah.
reconcile the need for teams to own what they do, and it's also by owning it, that also means operating it. So what does that mean when we're in three or four markets? And I don't think we've got kind of the answers to that yet. So I think that's certainly a
Okay.
challenge that we're facing the next year. And I think that's the flip side. I think to that, you could go the other way and you could just have one team writes it in one market and one team writes it in another.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. You can diversify and spread into more markets, but that might actually dilute the quality of some of the work that you're doing, from what I understand from some of what you've said, and challenges inside your business. An interesting
Yeah,
problem to solve.
yeah, or do operational challenges kind of overwhelm your ability to, is that all
Yeah.
you spend time doing rather than developing new functionality?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. You've obviously seen some really interesting growth, and this is typical question that we ask everyone that comes on the podcast. It's really key to the community that we've created, where people have access to phenomenal businesses growing that they do want to join because they're listening to compelling stories. Like I said, you've seen some growth in your year with the business, a phenomenal growth, I'll add. Is the business growing? Where are they growing? And what do you want to add to the teams?
Yeah, sure. So I think we are growing. We want to continue growing the the product in India, and I think we're adding quite a lot of exciting products in India. We are always growing. We've got sort of our main development centers are at London, India, and Sophia, but we are a remote first company. So I think if people are interested in Tide, go to the website and the careers page. I think we've also got a Tide engineering blog post on Medium. Yeah, we're always looking for kind of engineers who are interested in, like, I guess, delivering value to the end user, but who are kind of inquisitive, want to grow. We're I think there's you can do a lot of things at Tide, like if you've kind of got the willingness to kind of get stuck in, and I think there's a lot of empowerment to kind of get stuck into things. I think we're a very open community. I think the teams um, really work well together, and we don't kind of have architects and stuff like that. The teams help shape the
Yeah.
architecture, and we have discussions. We don't have sort of staff engineers just dropping in and saying this is how it should be built.
Yeah.
That's collaborated with the team. So I think it's a really good fun environment to work in, and I think we have had massive growth, and I think it's a really interesting place to work. Um, and I think we've got interesting problems to work on.
Okay. Do you only optimize for Java or JVM based engineers, or are you open to cross trainers?
I think we're open to cross trainers, and I think there are. So whilst I've talked about um, Java, that we did actually um, acquire a company called Funding Options a little while
Yeah.
ago, and they do. So that's another kind of string to our bow. Is we offer sort of credit solutions to our members. So some of it is direct lending, where we will lend the member money, but then one of the other ones is where we'll introduce them to partners, and that's kind of what Funding Options have done. So they're now called Partner
Yeah.
Credit Services. They're actually Python based, so they're very similar in terms of they've got a microservice based architecture. We're slowly sort of starting to integrate their stuff in onto our infrastructure layer, but they're still writing in Python. So there are opportunities there as well. But equally, I'd say we're interested in people who are willing to cross train. So one of the staff engineers who's joined recently is, I think, from a Go background and stuff like that. So yeah,
Okay.
there's certainly no obstacle in that respect. I think it's a
Yeah.
desire to learn and grow really that we look for.
I think most modern technology businesses nowadays adopt that mindset, really, in truth. I think it is the way to go for sure. Especially, casting a net as wide as open to cross training backgrounds and, remote first business, you'll get some phenomenal people that listen to this podcast. It's exactly why we asked the question. But I think for everyone listening, there'll be a link below for people to go and see the careers site. Andy, I want to say a big thanks. It was really interesting, listening to one platform, how it really does power the business and how you can pivot, into new markets quite quickly. Like I said, I've seen this a number of times, and I think it's a phenomenal thing if businesses can get it right. And there's been some really successful businesses on this pod that have gone and done that, yourselves included. Obviously, thanks for coming to share, some of your time and experience on, what Tide are building. And no doubt we'll be checking in at some point, next 6 to 12 months, seeing where you guys and girls are up to, and we'll have to check in and get you guys back on the pod.
Yeah, be happy to. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And for everyone listening, as always, likes, shares, subscribes, they're all massively appreciated. This podcast is free, and it's powered by the community itself. So we'd massively appreciate that. And thank you all. Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Engineers.io. It's no underscore. We've also got a website which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.